evening, everyone. I'm Bella from Locanation. Welcome to our live webinar. Today I'm here with Tim Skevington, Managing Director of Richmont's Christie's International Real Estate, the exclusive affiliate of Christie's International Real Estate here in Thailand. Tim, it's a pleasure to have you on our channel as one of Thailand's leading property experts.
Thank you very much, Bella, and thank you for joining. We'll have a discussion, I think, for about 20 minutes or so with a presentation, and I'm looking forward to that. And thank you for joining.
Okay, so today we'll be covering 3 key points that I know many of you are wondering. So first is what has actually happened to the Bangkok residential property market since the COVID-19 began, and the second is if you're an investor seeking for an investment opportunity, we're also going to be covering that. And the third part is what does the future hold? A difficult question to answer, but we're going to be covering that as well.
Okay, thanks, Bella. I think the first slide you can see there, I think we should all remember that actually even before the crisis started, the Bangkok property market was already in a bit of a lull. We ourselves were selling a lot in Hong Kong, for example, in 2019, and that was affected very much by the unrest in Hong Kong. There were other factors, as we know, affecting the market before the crisis, including the strong Thai baht. So just to put things into perspective, and particularly in terms of promotions and such like that we'll be talking a bit more about later, they were in existence before the crisis really kicked in February this year. If we move on to the next slide, I think just a little bit more detail on about what has happened physically, if you like, in Bangkok since the crisis began. Of course, we've had show suites close. We've had major events postponed, and we've had a much higher emphasis on online sales. Again, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. But it's also very much seen by some people now as an opportunity to buy. And one of the main reasons for that is because the developer response has been really with some very interesting promotions. So a lot of people, as I said, taking advantage of that. There have been delays, of course, with transfers on projects that are finishing now, particularly among foreign buyers who have not been able to come over to Thailand due to the flight suspensions. Some people as well have actually pulled out of purchases for various reasons, but there again, this has opened new opportunities, I think, for some buyers, looking for bargains right now. Just the next slide is to illustrate in a bit more detail about how the buyer experience has been changing, because obviously, as we've said, a lot more now online. But this has meant that, of course, there's less face-to-face discussions, negotiations between buyers and their agents and developers. There has been less offline advertising, but there's been a real uptick, I would say, on digital advertising. And also on making the process, the sales process, the purchase process, a bit easier for buyers to manage online. So that's an interesting change as well. Apart from the market changes I've just sort of covered, also the buyer experience changes that we've gone through and were going through before this started, but perhaps been accelerated by the situation. The next slide actually is interesting because it shows the reaction really of developers to the crisis. As I said, even before this began, there was a lull in the market. There was quite a lot of promotions going on, but these have, I would say, picked up. 80% of developers we see here have a COVID management team in place. So in terms of their own work practices, they've very much got things in hand. There is another figure there of 48% putting new project launches on hold. I think there were a lot of new projects put on hold anyway in 2019, but that obviously has been the case as well with the situation we have now. But a less promising figure perhaps is the number of inquiries, which we'd expect to have really decreased, and that's really across the board. But they've not dried up completely, which is a good sign.
Yes.
Yeah. In response, as I've said, the sort of digital approach has always been with us. But in response, we've seen a lot of very innovative ways that developers are using to reach out to buyers. And one of the ones that struck me, actually mentioned on the slide here, is how they're advertising on fast-moving consumer good portals like Shopee and Lazada, which I think is great. And actually, I understand the uptake has been good from that. The other accelerated change, I would say, is the use of technology to bring properties to buyers, if you like. So we've got 3D tours, Matterport. We ourselves are starting to use that more and more. A lot of buyers are asking for that, so they can have a walkthrough in 3D of projects. We're doing FaceTime and Zoom, Skype conferencing with clients. I think that's happening a lot more. And actually, salespeople are walking through with their mobile phones and discussing units with clients in real time. So it's actually still working, and buyers have an opportunity to experience the projects almost as though they were there.
So many of these things are going on a digital scale, right?
Yeah.
So now we're gonna pause for a minute for our Q&A session. We have some questions coming in. The first question is, will buyers get better deals when purchasing a project online?
Actually, a lot of the promotions that we're seeing are not just restricted to online purchases. Sometimes there may be an online campaign. We've seen a couple of developers recently highlight a number of hot units which can be booked online. But generally, promotions are open to whichever way the client approaches. Many clients, of course, using their agents to negotiate for them, and also to find the best promotions meeting their needs. So there's no hard and fast rule, I would say, about getting the best deal online.
All right, let's proceed to the second section of our webinar, which is what are the opportunities for investors? Where are they, and how to find them?
Right. Well, we mentioned already that there have been very deep price cuts on a lot of projects. So that, of course, is a great opportunity. Quite often, these price cuts are accompanied by other promotions, such as what we call free all, which is the developer is covering the cost of the management fees for a period, often a year. The developer may cover the cost of the sinking fund, and perhaps even also the transfer fee. Something that's interesting too is that developers and agents are working closely together, which is good, encouraging. And developers are giving some agents special deals that may not be openly advertised. So I would say that to buyers that they should consult with their agent to see whether the agent's got a particularly good offer that would meet their needs, and not just rely on advertising or their own research. The other point mentioned here actually is that ready-to-move projects, I think, are being particularly promoted, and perhaps because buyers will know their position now and be able to make a quicker decision, might be more relevant to the market as it is perhaps than off-plan, which are finishing in 2 years' time, and people not really sure about what will be going on then. So ready-to-move projects, definitely, a lot of them with very attractive promotions at the moment. And yeah, the next slide will show some of them. We've got discounts mentioned here of between 10 and 25%. That's really the case. Some of the prices are back to pre-launch levels on some projects. So projects that were launched probably around 2016, some of them finishing around now. So pricing is really looking very interesting in some of those. For Thai buyers mainly, because the banks are involved, the bank loans are involved, there's installment payment assistance for up to the first 2 years, typically. But also for all buyers, as I mentioned, these free management fees, etc. And then some developers like Superlai, we see there on the slide, at their project Superlai Oriental, they've actually offered a leasehold option, so that if people want to get a bigger discount, they can buy a leasehold right now and get 30% off. But they still have the option to buy the freehold later, so they can pay the difference whenever they're ready if they want to. So that's pretty innovative. And that's really why I think it's worth going to a professional and just checking out what the latest deals are, so you get the best for you.
Plus, it's a great variation that each of these developers have by creating different types of promotions and discounts that can relate to each buyer's nature. And I think that's an amazing thing that they're doing right now.
We've got lifestyle buyers, rental investors, different. So you'd need to look carefully on exactly what it is that you want, and then you can look at the promotions accordingly.
And as you've mentioned, there are actually some discounted units. We have a question coming in that asks, are discounted units quality units, or are they inferior in any way?
That's a good question, actually. I would say definitely discounted units are not necessarily poorer quality or less attractive than non-discounted. And the reason for that is because some of the units that are coming back on for sale are actually returned. So they may have been bought very early on by buyers who, for one reason or another, aren't able to transfer now. So there is a mix. There will be some that have perhaps been left over, but if you have the opportunity to look carefully through an inventory left over, then no doubt you will find some gems in there.
Okay. And where are these opportunities? How can we actually find them?
Well, there's advertising everywhere, but again, as I mentioned, you could ask your real estate agent. If you have a particular area in mind, then obviously you can concentrate on that. If you're an investor, I think that for rental purposes, Sukhumvit has always probably been the favored area. and there are certainly some opportunities there. I think around mid-Sukhumvit, some recently completed projects near to BTS stations. There have been returns, and there are some units left over which are looking very attractive. And of course, there's been a big upsurge in lifestyle buyers buying around the riverside. So the riverside again, some very nice projects and some very interesting promotions in those. Generally, probably a higher end segment, but interesting promotions nonetheless in those projects too. Yeah.
So let's then on to the third section. What does the future hold? And when can we see signs of recovery?
Well, I've written some notes here, and I've concluded that I'm not a fortune teller. So that's a tough question.
Yes, it is.
There are surveys like the one I just mentioned from FASWAS, in which developers, the majority of developers have predicted an upturn in Q3 this year. I think that in the bigger picture, obviously we don't really have any situation directly comparable with the coronavirus pandemic that we're experiencing now in modern times, certainly. However, we could perhaps draw some comparison with the SARS epidemic in 2003, which was less widespread, certainly, but affected Asia in particular. And we can see, as you can see on the slide here, actually, that there was quite a V-shaped rebound. I think for various reasons, we may not expect that following the coronavirus pandemic, but that's optimistic anyway. There are surveys that are also quite optimistic, including on the next slide, CBRE's Investor Intentions Survey, which found that one thing just stopping investors right now are travel restrictions. So we've of course got those in place in Thailand until the end of May at the moment. Hopefully, if they are reduced at the end of May, we could see more foreigners coming in, and here we're expecting perhaps those first buyers maybe coming in from China. We'll have to wait and see. If we again though look at China being the first country really to be affected by this, and the first country I think to show signs of a return to normality, or at least an attempt to get back to normality, some sort of normality. The figures coming out from the real estate market there are certainly very promising. Here again, on this slide, we can see some reports of what they call revenge spending.
Revenge spending, that's an interesting...
Yeah, this was illustrated by the take-up in some high-profile projects, for example in Shenzhen, in southern China, in recent weeks. And the figures there you see for the increase in purchases week on week in recent days. So very promising. Hopefully might be replicated here in Thailand, but there, we'll just have to wait and see. The market conditions in China before this happened obviously were different from those we were going through in Thailand.
Actually, Thailand has been one of the countries that has been dealing with the COVID-19 situation quite well. And what do you think about that? Do you think that will affect more people to want to come in and move into Thailand or invest in?
Well, I think that if we look at the chart here, this slide, it shows figures for infections, and Thailand ranked as number 59th in the list of countries with coronavirus infections. Thailand has certainly been commended for its response to the coronavirus pandemic. But of course, we have to remember, as everyone knows, that we don't necessarily have the same testing rates here. So the figures not entirely accurate. But nevertheless, even within Southeast Asia, Thailand, fortunately, doesn't appear to be so badly affected, and the government's response, as I mentioned, has been commended. This may perhaps lead people to also look at Thailand as an investment destination or a lifestyle, a place where they'd like to live. In future, Thailand, of course, has got great medical facilities, as everybody knows, and there are many other reasons why people like to move here. But those are interesting figures, certainly. I think for a lot of foreign buyers, they will be.
So, we also have a question coming in. Oh, there's actually a lot. Do you anticipate distressed selling becoming apparent? And if so, which market segments would you expect this to take place?
We have had downturns before in Thailand, and we can, for example, look back to 2008, 2009, collapse of Lehman Brothers. Thailand then was a lot less affected than other countries, particularly Europe and the US. I think mainly because people were not so leveraged. And I think that's the same situation now. So I don't foresee any panic selling. There's no sign of it yet. I think if there was going to be panic selling, we'd be in the middle of it. I think that people are taking a longer time to make decisions, which is to be expected. But the market has not disappeared, and we don't see a huge fall in prices. We just see some very interesting promotions, particularly from recently finished projects. Yeah.
And what about the trends? What do you expect in the change in trends? Like, say, for instance, you've mentioned earlier about when you look at a location, you have to bear in mind that mass transit lines are opening soon. Do you think that this COVID-19 situation has changed these people's minds when it comes to the amenities around them? Would they value the amenities more? Or how about building construction? What about that?
Yeah. On the next slide, we can see that, without question, there will be more considerations, I think, among buyers and developers when looking at a project. So sustainability would be one of them, wellness in building design, LEED and WELL certified buildings, I think, will become more the norm, more the requirement. The change in working practices, I think, is very interesting too. I think that this could lead to more emphasis perhaps on co-working spaces in buildings, maybe in the design of individual units even. There might be more emphasis on a workspace. Lower density building may become a priority. People may look more for second homes in less crowded environments. I think this is something that is being talked about more, particularly in some other countries as well. But it could be a consideration for buyers in Thailand too, to look for somewhere outside of town. But on a more practical basis too, I think that as there are fewer buyers in the market, generally what would happen is that the rental market would go up. So there again, it might be an interesting time for investors to look at those rental investments, because the rental market is likely to strengthen.
If investors are looking for second homes, which areas in Thailand would you think is suitable?
Well, there's a large choice. I mean, there's a lot of lovely resorts areas in Thailand. Many of them are quite busy.
Yes.
So when I mention about looking for less dense living, some buyers may be looking to some of the mixed use communities that are becoming more popular. For example, there's the Forestias project by MQDC, which is a massive project over more than 50 rai on Bang Nha Trad Road, and comprises senior living, retail, as well as medical facilities. So people may not want to travel so widely and want things on their doorstep. So that might be a new trend. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Okay. So you have a couple of key takeaways, right?
Yeah, I just at the end to conclude, I mean, the first one is obvious. We can't really tell the future, but no doubt there will be some changes, and there have been, as I've been researching, quite a lot of positive signs, or at least opinions that, perhaps in Q3 we might start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's not too far off. And that's also perhaps why anybody looking to take advantage of the many promotions that we have right now on many projects in Bangkok should start thinking about making decisions. We've got the digital, we've got all the technology in place to pretty much bring people to the property without them physically visiting. So, and I think that's the aim really of developers and agents right now, is to try and help buyers make that decision without them needing to travel, so they're able to take advantage of the promotions that we have right now. When travel restrictions are finally lifted, I think as well that'll really help, obviously, the foreign buyer market. But as we've said there in the final tagline, I think the end story is that everybody's going to need a home. So we're in a dip right now, but I think those older investors, shall we say, like myself, will have seen similar dips and opportunities there, and the market picking up again. So that's the message I think I would like to leave with. Yeah.
We also have another question. When do we expect the market will resume better? You said earlier it was in around Q3 this year, right?
That seems to be quite a general consensus. We are, obviously taking things as they come. We just heard even in the last couple of days about the new lockdown is too strong a word, but the new restrictions, shall we say, on business in Thailand, and the lifting of some of those restrictions. So I think there's a step-by-step approach by most governments. So we'll just have to see how that works out. But at the moment, touch wood, it's looking as though we might be coming through this in Thailand. So perhaps Q3 is not a bad guess, which, as I said, is not that far away. Yeah.
Okay. We have time for one last question. To put myself in the shoes of a general buyer, the situation as it is would require me to save more for security. What would be the benefits for me if I were to purchase a condominium right now?
Well, that's a very personal question. I mean, it really depends on people's situation. But if security means saving, then you'd obviously have to see what the return on that was for you versus possibly the benefit you could get and the better return you could get on receiving a deep discount on buying right now. I mean, as we mentioned, some of the discounts are 10, 20, 25%, even more. And again, if you speak to your agent, I think that they might well be able to negotiate more. So I think you need to offset that, opportunity too, when making this decision, because this is a rare time, and something I've not seen before. So, and it's a buyer's market. So if you're cash rich, then you should seriously look at it, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers your questions. Okay, so you guys, that concludes our live webinar. I hope you guys enjoyed today's session, and thank you so much, Contim, for being here and answering all of the things that we've been wondering, we've been questioning, and of course, I hope you guys are staying safe at home, and we're all hoping for the best for the real estate industry market in Thailand, and and I'll be seeing you guys on our next video or maybe another webinar. And bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.